Historically, women participated less in education programs due to the patriarchal tradition. The continuous socioeconomic development and improvement of women's position due to the re-entry in the labor market and the state education policy that imposed compulsory education has to led improvements, a dramatic increase in the proportion of women taking part in the education system and gradually reducing the gender gap in gender equality opportunities between the genders. Of course, the pay gap is often simple due to the gender discrimination. For example, recent empirical studies, according to the European Commission, have concluded that there are job characteristics that attract higher pay or bonuses that are usually available to men. Men are rewarded because they can work long hours or specific hours, take no breaks in their careers, and move more easily to other regions or countries. Women who choose this education path and careers face many obstacles, ranging from the stereotypes that affect girls to the prejudices that women face when choosing a field of study and the difficulty of combining their careers with family responsibilities. We need to encourage girls to study science and become scientists. We need to bring science to the primary and secondary classes and explain to students what is going on in the lab. We need to explain that science is not just about bugs and plants or the mixing of chemicals. We need to show them that science drives progress and can be used to improve our lives.
Elinor Ostrom was born in Los Angeles, California on August 7, 1933 and grew up during the Great Depression. Her childhood was spent learning and doing the traditional activities of a girl during the last century. Her favorite activity was swimming, and she eventually joined the swimming team and swam on competitions until she started teaching swimming to earn funds that she could save to help her through college. In 1963, she married Vincent Ostrom, who was a political scientist. Since her home in Los Angeles was located at the lower edge of Beverly Hills, her mother arranged for her to attend Beverly Hills High School. She was also encouraged to join the debate team in her junior year of high school and participated actively in speech competitions around the state. After finishing school, she decided to study political sciences at the University of Los Angeles. Then, she wanted to continue her studies, that's why she applied for a PhD in economics at UCLA. She came across with the fact that she was only one of the 3 women in her class. In her graduate work, she participated in a research team studying the water industry in Southern California. In 1965, Vincent Ostrom, her husband, offered her a position that was very appealing to her as a professor at the University of Indiana. After a year of teaching freshmen, she was asked to be a graduate advisor. After this, she did the research on policy, industry structure, and performance. This lasted for 15 years. Finally, she studied the Commons. In 2009, she was awarded the Nobel Memorial Prize in Economic Sciences for her analysis of economic governance, especially the Commons. To date, she remains the first of only 2 women to win the Nobel Prize in Economics, the other being Esther Duflo.
We've been on set.
But this is already improvised, so...
Economists. Not a group with a lot of Marys, Natashas, or Juanitas. And that's caused a lot of controversy. However, what's often overlooked are the actual female economists who are pushing economics forward by addressing real-world issues. Welcome to Women in Economics.
There's short norms about how you use social networks, right? That's you.
Yeah. Let's try a little bit on that.
Ostrom, take 2 marker.
So when I talk about economics based on the cooperation of a local community, some people's minds might instantly jump to... But no, Elinor Ostrom wasn't a socialist. Born in Los Angeles and a child of the Great Depression era, Ostrom's childhood was colored by digging a wartime victory vegetable garden, knitting scarves for the troops, and buying her clothes in a charity store. From an early age, the principles of cooperation and also resource conservation, they were ingrained deeply in her view of the world.
I had to learn very early how to work hard and be independent.
So it's no surprise that what's arguably her greatest accomplishments in economics, they have to do with disproving the consensus on what's been known as the tragedy of the commons. But hold on. What is the tragedy of the commons? Economists widely assumed that the common ownership of important resources would result in excessive exploitation.
People using a pasture or a lake or something, they're helplessly trapped into trying to get as much as they can for themselves.
Imagine fishermen overfishing a common pond because each fisherman is afraid the others will pull out the fish first. So they all take out fish very rapidly, and next thing you know, there won't be any fish left in the pond. She didn't take that consensus as a given. Her history made her used to being a contrarian.
So in the early years, I think being a woman was a big handicap. Getting into graduate school was a challenge. My mother wasn't even enthusiastic about my going to college, where it was, you'll never be able to teach in a major university, you just can't get a job, da-da-da-da-da.
In other words, she had to recognize repeatedly that what the establishment was saying wasn't always right.
But I just got fascinated with what I was doing, and so being a stubborn son of a gun, I just kept going.
So she approached the tragedy of the commons problem in a quite different way. Rather than just the typical theorizing found in economics texts at the time, she took a case study approach. She got out of the office and she talked to people on the ground. She traveled to investigate communal irrigation systems in Spain, forests in Nepal, and mountain villages in Japan.
We found all sorts of patterns out there in the world. People self-organized common property institutions of a wide diversity of kind, and sometimes solve problems very well.
She inserted herself into communities, and she collaborated with other disciplines, not just economics, but also ecology, computer science, and psychology. All of that informed her research and her findings. Ostrom's key insight was to point out that very often, at least under the right circumstances, these tragedy of the commons problems can be solved, and especially they can be solved by small groups.
And empirical work has shown people have found ways of agreeing on their own rules and extracting themselves from the problem.
If you look at her total number of citations, how many times other researchers mentioned her work, she really was very close at the top. And in 2009, Lynn became the first woman to win the Nobel Prize in Economics. One way to solve problems is centralized government control, or maybe turn resource management over to a big private company. But Elinor Ostrom laid out how group norms applied at the local level really could help to solve a lot of environmental problems. That those small groups, they would develop rules telling hunters, how many deer can you shoot this season? How many fish can you pull out of the ground? How much water can you draw from the aquifer? And that communities working on that small local scale, using sanctions and rules and local governance, that they would be able to address a lot of environmental problems. And I think of Elinor Ostrom as really one of the great environmental optimists of our time.
We've been kind of taught that those rules are the rules. And what we know from the field is that rules on paper and rules in form are different.
Absolutely.
Maybe to stop there.
Want to better understand Ostrom and the tragedy of the commons? Click here for related materials and practice questions. Or check out other videos on how economists are tackling real-world problems such as poverty, education, and unemployment.
Few things about her life. Esther Duflo is the second and the youngest woman in the world to be awarded the Nobel Prize in Economics. She was born in Paris in 1972. Her mother, Violaine Duflo, was pediatrician, and her father, Michael Duflo, was mathematics professor. She began her undergraduate studies at the École Normale Supérieure in Paris, planning to study history, her interest in childhood. In addition, she pursued a master's degree from Delta, which is now known as the Paris School of Economics. Then she went to the United States as she matriculated at Massachusetts Institute of Technology for her PhD studies, finishing her doctorate in economics. Having completed her doctorate, she was immediately hired as an assistant professor in the MIT in 2002. This institute recognized the flaw by giving her the title of associate professor, and she took the honor of being the youngest member of the school at the age of 29 years old. 1 year later, in 2003, Esther Duflo Habzihit Banerjee, who was a professor in MIT, and her husband since 2015, and Senthil Mullainathan, who was economist in MIT, founded Abdul Latif Jamel Poverty Action Lab. Abdul Latif Jamel Poverty Action Lab was founded in 2003 at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. It is a global research center working to reduce poverty. They attempt to improve the effectiveness of poverty programs by providing measures with clear scientific results that help shape successful policies to control poverty. And searched by a network of 200 affiliated professors at universities around the world, GPAL conducts randomized impact evaluations to answer critical questions in the fight against poverty. In this lab, research becomes action. Because of their work, a culture of evidence policy making is informed around the world. Their policy analysis and outreach help governments, NGOs, donors, and private sector apply evidence from randomized evaluations of their work. Also, they contribute to public discourse around some of the most pressing questions in social policy and international development. Despite the fact that she works as a professor and her special work, it is worth noting that Esther turned to writing books with Abhijit Banerjee, who is her husband and colleague. The books are mainly referred to economic issues and the consequences of poverty. More details. Their first book, entitled Poor Economics, was published in 2011, which is best known, referred to economists who argue about paying attention to evidence. One cannot only understand the real causes of poverty, but can also see how to end it. They maintain that most charitable organizations want to help the poor, but their assumptions are based on generalizations. It looks at how the impoverished make decisions on education, savings, healthcare, food, and other issues. The second book, which is called Handbook of Field Experiments Vol 1 and 2, was brought out in 2017. Volume 1 looks at how to conduct experimental research and how to create a catalogue on new results from areas that are yet to be explored. Furthermore, Volume 2 explains how to conduct experimental research, present an up-to-date catalogue of research, as well as which areas need to be explored. Last but not least, Esther and Abhijit wrote the book Good Economics for Hard Times in 2019. This book examines how finances can escape various political and social problems. Economists argue that solutions to such issues already exist, but we have no idea how to overcome the mindset that prevails. Three economists, Esther Duflo, Abhijit Banerjee, and Michael Kremer, were awarded the Nobel Prize in Economics. By working, they help in the fight against poverty on a global level, and they try to improve children's education. More specifically, their research has resulted in the development of remedial teaching in India and Africa. In addition to their work, they encourage many governments to increase funding for preventive medicine. Duflo told to Reuters, "We start with the idea that the poor are often portrayed as caricatures, and even people who try to help them do not really understand the causes of their problems. What we are trying to achieve with our approach is to say, look, let's try to solve the problems one by one and tackle them as best and scientifically as we can."